Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, my people. What is going on, everybody? Thank you very much for tuning in. Welcome to the Sleeper Show. Tuesday, January 21st. Just get that camera exactly where I like it. Thank you for being here. About a minute behind today. Not going to lie. A little hectic this morning. A little hectic. Cheers to everybody. Got my cup of coffee this morning. Went to Starbucks this morning. I know. Not exactly, a local operation, a local business, but I was kind of frantic this morning. Had a lot going on. But I'm here, ready to go, ready to talk some sports with my people here. Thank you for being a part of the show. Thank you for being a part of the chat. Thank you for being a part of the channel. All right. I do got a quote for everybody today, and then we'll get to a little rundown of what we got going on for the show today, and we'll take it from there. All right. I do have a guest today as well, which I'll get into in just a second. All right. Here's a quote of the day: every neighbor can be your teacher. Every neighbor can be your teacher. All right. Hopefully that quote means something there. What does that mean? It means, hey, everywhere you go, somebody could probably teach you a little something, something. So that's a quote for today. I'm going to get a sip of my coffee here. Then I'm going to take a quick look at the comments, and then we're going to do the rundown, and then we're going to get the show started. All right. Mm. Sometimes you got to slurp a little bit. In the Japanese culture, it's like a compliment when you slurp. It's a compliment to the food. That means you really, really like the food. Maybe I should start slurping my coffee more. Mm. It's good coffee right there. All right, a couple of these comments here. I'm going to get the show started. I like sometimes, by the way, in the morning, just kind of taking a second. Let's take a quick second here. We don't have to jump right into it. Let's have a little conversation. Good morning, Sleep from Phoenix. Thank you, my brother. My my neighbors. Come on, man. You can learn something from everybody. You're not going to learn anything with that attitude. Come on. It's all how you look at things. All right, game of the year tonight. I'm not kidding. It might be the worst basketball game in the history of the NBA is coming up tonight. Big Al, where's the coffee from? Look, Tony P, I know. No, not today. Today, other questions. Today, it's just it's a standard cup of coffee. But in other days, when it's a little bit more, got a little bit more of a local feel to it, then that's different. Good morning, Slee. Aloha. What a wonderful day. Appreciate the love from Hawaii out there. One of the beauties about being on YouTube is you can get people from anywhere. So people can obviously tune into the show from wherever. So thanks for being a part of it. We got somebody here from the Philippines, somebody from Dallas. Thank you for being a part of the show. Appreciate you all being a part of the show. All right, let me give everybody a quick rundown of the show, and then we're going to get things started here. Here's what we got going on today. I was doing some work this morning. I'm kind of looking at, all right, where are we? Wait. By the time today's done, we're at the halfway point of the season. Halfway point should have came a little bit earlier, but obviously because of the fires in LA, a couple games that were postponed for the Lakers. But when tonight's game is done, I would argue the biggest game of the year, most exciting game of the season tonight against the mighty Washington Wizards. Where are the Wizards sitting, by the way, just so I have that as some context? By the time tonight's game is done, Wizards, they're 6-35. That's good. They've lost 10 games in a row. That's good. That's actually for the Lakers. It's actually great timing that they get them and a 7:30 tip-off. You guys know how much I love the 7:30 tip-offs. I can't wait to do a post-game show with you guys at 1 a.m. in the morning. By the time tonight's game is done, we're going to be at the halfway point of the season. So really, I kind of want to just highlight some of the things so far this year, some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses. I know there's been a lot of negative energy around the Lakers, and I get it because I probably have that same negative energy. But I do think there are some things to point out through the first 40, 41 games of the season that I want to spend some time on today. So we'll do a little bit of that. Pelinka's decision, kind of give you guys a little context to this. Pelinka does have a big decision to make, and I'm curious, based off of what he does, what it means. If he makes a move, what kind of move does he make? What if he does nothing? Does that also send a message back to LeBron and everybody else on that team? Well, this is what we're working with. I'm not going to go chase. You guys haven't convinced me enough that I got to go spend more assets because this team isn't going to go anywhere. I think it's going to be an interesting, couple of weeks for the Lakers, couple of weeks for Rob Pelinka. So we'll look into that. I got some Dodger thoughts. Got to be honest with everybody. Can I tell you guys in a perfect world, and we don't live in a perfect world, but let me paint that picture for you, that no matter what I talk about on this channel, no matter whatever it is that we get into, in a perfect world, we can actually have good, healthy conversations slash debates back and forth where, okay, that's your standpoint. This is my standpoint. And whether we agree with each other or we don't, I think that would be phenomenal if we can have that type of dialogue. Basically, me with the listeners or listeners with the listeners, right? You guys, when you guys are talking to each other. I was reading some of the comments yesterday after put up that Dodger segment yesterday. And gotta be honest with you, I was kind of impressed. I was a little bit impressed. I think I think the channel might be heading in that exact direction that I'm hoping for. I'll spend a little bit of time on that. Cooper Kupp, Rams, just a couple quick things there. Dylan Hernandez, who covers really, he's a sports columnist here in LA for the Los Angeles Times. He's going to join the show at 8:30. I'm looking forward to chatting with Dylan. Him and I have had a lot of kind of side conversations about certain topics. So we'll bring those to the forefront. Now we'll get a chance to talk about them together, and we'll do it here on YouTube. And then last night, obviously, the Notre Dame Ohio State College Football Championship. I'm not going to spend time breaking down the game, but I do want to get people's thoughts of what they thought about the college football format. Do you like the format? Do you not like the format? What are the changes you want to see? What is it eventually going to look like down the road? So at the end of the show, we'll spend a little time on that. Again, not too much. I'm not going to be the guy if you're looking for Ohio State, Notre Dame breakdown. I'm sure there's much better people to go listen to on that, but just more conceptually what we thought of the college football program. All right, let's get the show started. Cheers to everybody. I'm at a disadvantage on the show. Let me tell you guys why I'm at a disadvantage. I'm at a disadvantage because while you guys sit there and sip your coffee and everyone's enjoying their morning, I got to kind of navigate with you guys. I got to find pockets, just pockets to get a quick sip in. And then, sometimes that silence, people are like, where'd Al go? Where'd he go? All right, I'm ready to go. Let's get the show started. Let me start off here. Just run one quick one. I appreciate the super. Laker in Hawaii. Have a cup of coffee on me, brother. Thank you very much, Laker in Hawaii. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. You're right. That super right there, after YouTube takes its share, after Uncle Sam gets a couple dollars in there as well, you bought my cup of coffee this morning. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. All right, so halfway point of the season. If I told Laker fans, let's focus on the positives here for a quick second. All right, let's focus on the positives. Lakers, by the way, got the Wizards tonight. By the time this game is done tonight and we're doing the post-game show at 2 a.m. in the morning, who plays at 7:30? Who's still playing at 7:30? Does somebody want to explain that to me? And when you're playing Washington, you should start at 4:30. If you got a game against the Wizards, I don't think the game's going to be so. Started at 4:30. Everybody's home by 7. 7:30 tip-off. By the time tonight's game is over, obviously Lakers will be at the halfway point of the season. So I want to break down some of the things that I've liked, some of the things I've disliked so far this year, some of the surprises, whatever the case is. And you guys can obviously tag into this as well. Let's just focus on the positives first. All right. I know in today's society, it's not common to focus on the positives, but let's try to do that with the Lakers. Let's think, what are the things that we've liked about this season so far for the Lakers? I'll tell you the one that comes to my mind right out the gate. And we'll do dislikes as well, and then this will kind of transition us to Rob Pelinka. One of the things that I've enjoyed so far this season is when I look at the standings, they're not 10th, they're not 11th, they're not 8th. They actually, in this weird way, even with the up and downs, even with the record that they've had against teams over 500. If I'm just looking at the standings, Lakers are, in a weird way, comfortably in 6th. I don't know how the hell they got there. I don't know how, 22-18, I didn't know was good enough to be 6th place in the Western Conference. But if I'm trying to find a positive stat from the Lakers so far this year. Halfway point, just about to come up by the time we're here tomorrow morning, we're at the halfway point. That's one of the things that sticks out to me is like, how many times has this team been, they've got off to such a bad start, or they're 4 or 5 games below 500 in the first 3, 4 weeks of the season. And then um, they're struggling just to get back in the mix. As we sit here today on January 21st at 8:12 a.m., the Lakers are actually out of that play-in tournament. Now, listen, with the style that they're playing and the way they have been playing and how they've went up against teams that are above 500, um, it they've got a little lucky in regards to that. We know what's going on with Dallas because of their injuries. The rest of the teams in the Western Conference, to be honest with you, I think they're going to just kind of be struggling the rest of the way. There'll be good games, they'll have some bad games, and I'm talking about the teams like Minnesota, Phoenix, Golden State, San Antonio. The one team I don't understand, to be honest with you, I don't understand Sacramento right now. Sacramento's kind of throwing me off here. They've won 9 of their last 10. They're kind of starting to shoot back up in the standings. So that's the one team that you look out for because they're playing well. Now, Lakers obviously swept them this year. But of all the things that I look at that I would say are positive, the positive to me is before I even look at any player analysis or any of that stuff, if I told you, hey, halfway point of the season, Lakers are around 6th in the Western Conference, I'd be like, okay, sure, that sounds good. So that's one of the positives that I take away. I think that also tells me that it's kind of shockingly, they're not in a terrible spot, right? I think they are going to need, they're in a position right now where you feel like the roster's just going to get better. I don't think it can really get any worse unless there's, obviously a bad injury. But when I say that it's going to get better, let me tell you what I mean by that. Eventually, and I do believe this, that they are going to make a trade. Okay, well, the roster is probably going to improve in the short term because of that trade. Eventually, Jared Vanderbilt will be back with the Los Angeles Lakers, unless there's another setback. And if there is, then everybody's going to say, Al, how could you actually believe that Vando was going to come back? Well, your roster will improve just naturally because of those two things. If it's just the Vando portion or if it's the Vando plus you went out there and you made a trade. Those are, I would say, the two areas that I'm optimistic about of how the team can improve. I think their defense can get better. I know they're inconsistent. I know there are times we're watching this team, we're saying, what the hell is this team? The wild swings that the Lakers have. I think there are a few things that are positive. It ain't perfect. 22-18. I don't think anybody, is sitting back. It's one thing to be 22-18, and let's just say you've had some bad losses, but damn, have you had a lot of good wins? That would be a different story. But unfortunately for the Lakers right now, they're kind of just feasting on the bad teams, and they're not really making it happen versus a lot of those teams that are above 500. Okay, let me get into some of the things halfway through the season that have been frustrating. This might be one of the most wildly inconsistent teams I've watched in a long time. One quarter, they look great. Second and third quarter, they look like a completely different team. And then fourth quarter, they turn it around. Or first half, they're phenomenal. Second half, they're outscored by 26. My frustration with the Lakers is there is zero consistency with this team. So when I watch the first half of the season, and I see what the Lakers have done, and I try to, point out some positives and things along those lines. There's a lot of times that I'm watching the Lakers and I'm like, you can't even get excited about a good quarter or a good half because you're like, yeah, well, there's still another quarter or another half left. So what am I going to get excited about when I know that this team is capable at any moment, going the other way, going the other direction? Okay, let me find another. Let me actually. I'm skipping here a little bit because I did forget one positive. I have thought so far this year I'm okay with JJ Redick. I'm all right with him. I'm not telling you he's great. I'm not telling you he's going to be Pat Riley or Phil Jackson or one of these other coaches. But what I'm telling you is I've seen enough to say, all right, I don't think we're losing games because of him. I don't think I don't think I'm watching JJ Redick and saying to myself, Lakers are screwed for the next couple of years. I don't. I think JJ over time will probably continue to get a roster that he feels like is the right roster for him. What he's been able to do with Max Christie and just give him those opportunities, I think that's a positive sign. But overall, I've been okay with JJ Redick. Let me go back to some of the more inconsistencies with the Lakers. Um, I think a lot of Laker fans are going to be able to relate with me when I say this. When you watch sports or you're watching your team, you know you're not going to win every game. You know there's going to be times where you're like, okay, well, that was ugly. You know there's going to be times where it's like, all right, well, the referees were awful in this game. Whatever the case, you're going to have every type of emotion. The one thing that I do think you are hoping for when you're watching your squad play, any sport, if you got a college team that you watch, if you got a professional NBA team, a baseball team, NFL team, the one thing that I think you hope for is the style of play enjoyable? I do not find the Lakers' style of play enjoyable. There have not been many times where I've watched Lakers basketball this year through the first half of the season where I've sat back and said, I like this. I like where this is going. Wow. The ball movement, the defense, the this, the that. Maybe there's moments where that occurs or where that happens. But I think for the most part, stylistically, the Lakers are not a fun watch. They're not a good watch, especially compared to some of these other teams in the NBA. And what could that be? That could be, Bron's got the ball too much, or too many turnovers, or lazy defense, or they get punched in the chin and they don't punch back. However, you want to describe it and look at it and kind of emphasize what you view as enjoyable. I feel like I get a lot of that from Laker fans. I feel like I get a lot of Laker fans that say, I just don't really like watching this for the eye test. When you go to a restaurant, I don't need the restaurant to be perfect every night. But if I'm walking away more times than not at this restaurant and I'm saying to myself, the food's just not that good, it doesn't motivate me to go back to that restaurant. Maybe it's a family-owned restaurant. You have no choice, but you got to keep going back. And maybe that's what it is with the Lakers. It's like, okay, well, I know that people are going to bitch and complain, but you know what's going to happen tonight at 7:30? Most people are going to tune into the game, and they're going to hope the Lakers get a win. It might be ugly. It might be pretty at times, but that's another thing that kind of stands out to me when I look at the Lakers so far this year, and I'm looking at the first half. Here are the things I like. Here are the things I dislike. One of the things that is a little bit it's off-putting. It's like the style of basketball. No, not too crazy about it. Last thing that I'm going to mention here, and then I'll start looking at some of your comments here. The last part that I think has been frustrating to me is as the season goes on, it becomes more and more apparent they're not a championship contender, right? I don't think many people are watching my show right now or have watched Lakers basketball this year and are having, honest conversations that are saying to themselves, yeah, when the dust settles, Lakers are going to be in the mix. I think it would be shocking if they're in the mix. Let's put it that way. So those are some of the things I think for me through the first half of the season that stick out to me. What stick out to me more than anything else at this point is there are some positives that I can point out. I think the standings where the Lakers are sitting. I mentioned some positives about JJ Redick. I think there is opportunity for this team to get better. Max Christie has been a positive, but when I look at some of the negatives so far this year, they're wildly inconsistent. I don't really even know. I still don't know what the Lakers' identity is. The style of play is not all that great. And then if we're all being honest with each other, we also all know that they're not a championship contender. All right, let's take a look at some of the comments here, and we'll keep things going. All right, let's see what we got here. Richard, thank you, brother. Cheers to you. Cheers. Basically, now I just cheers. Cheers to you, my friend. I think that's when I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. Anytime somebody sends me a super, it's my excuse to take a cheers and then get a sip of coffee. All right, I saw the movie Unstoppable this weekend. Lakers should watch as a team. Anthony Robles had one leg, yet more heart hustle and more hustle than the Lakers as a whole. Sad. Can I tell you something, Richard? I was watching the game. I was at Intuit Dome, so I was at the Lakers Clippers game on Sunday, and where you sit, you're around other media people, and maybe you know these media people, maybe you don't, whatever the case is. But I kept looking over to my right. There's a young kid He's sitting there and, he's covering the teams as well. And I kept churning over to him, and I'm just like, they don't fight. Now, here's the funny thing. You know, when I said that? I said that when the Lakers were down 26. And then Lakers went on like an 11-0 run or 13-0 run, whatever it is. And all of a sudden they were fighting. So I'm like, all right, well, that's what I get for that. But man, is that not the most discouraging thing to watch when you're watching your squad or your team and you're like, yeah, these guys just, there's like certain times there's great effort. And then there's a lot of other times it's like they're just going through the motions. It's like going to work when you don't want to go to work, right? We all have that. We've all had that. We're probably all, a lot of us still have that today. But you got to, at least from an effort perspective, obviously that's not something that you want to show. Richard, thank you for the comment, buddy. All right, let me get another one in here. Beast mode. Cheers. Cheers, bud. Cheers to you. Nothing like a cup of coffee in the morning. Rob has to rebuild. News came out. Front office doesn't want to go all in. I get it. Maybe there isn't an attractive trade, but you can't have the cake and eat it too. Rob, this is perfect. This is going to take me right into my next topic that I want to get into. Okay. So if I missed some of the other comments in there, I'll get to them in a little bit. But one of my topics that I have here, you're right. There was a report out there that said that the Lakers not willing to go in. You know what I find so interesting? Actually, our buddy, Jovan Buha, was the one that reported this. I'm going to read a little bit of this article, and I'm going to spend some time on this because I think it's a great, great conversation and a topic. Let me tell you why. Rob Pelinka has a decision to make. Rob Pelinka's job is to not just look at January 21st and where the Lakers are sitting. Rob Pelinka's job is to look at the Lakers a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And we'll see. How long is Rob Pelinka going to be doing this? I have no idea. If I will tell you this, and I've said this before, if Rob Pelinka is recycling another coach in 2 years, then you got to recycle your president of basketball operations, because you can't have one individual hiring all these different coaches and then it's the coach's fault every single time. So this is a critical stage for Rob Pelinka. But here's what the article said. It says Laker rumors. Rivals sense half-measure trade more likely than going all in. Okay. Per the Athletics, Jovan Buha, the sense from rival scouts and front office executives around the NBA is the Lakers are more likely to either stand pat or make a half-measure trade rather than try to go all in. Let me say this. Let me say this real quick with Rob Pelinka. His actions are going to speak louder than his words. Whatever Rob Pelinka tells you, a couple off seasons now, I've heard Rob Pelinka. I've been there. I've been in the same room. Rob Pelinka's addressing the media, and he says that you can't buy a house that's not for sale. Then he said, you know what, this summer we're going to have 3 first-rounders to work with. He's said some things. I'm not crazy about that strategy. I'm not crazy about the strategy of over-promising, under-delivering. I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. But he said some things to lead you to believe, oh, damn, Lakers are using some first-rounders. They're going to be doing something here. Something big's going to come for the Lakers. That hasn't happened. Okay. He made his first move that I think right now a lot of people who maybe they were D'Angelo Russell fans, maybe they weren't. Maybe they just need Dorian Finney-Smith to do better. So far with the Lakers, he's been really quiet, really hasn't done anything. And I haven't had a game yet where I could come on the postgame and say, DFS. That's why he's on your team. That's why you traded D'Lo. That's why you got rid of that expiring contract. With all that said, Rob Pelinka is about to tell us how he feels. LeBron had a comment on Sunday saying, well, this is just the construction of our team. Lakers got to play near perfect basketball. And you hear LeBron, when he's talking about the construction of our team, he's talking about the front office. He's talking about Rob Pelinka. Here's the decision Rob's got to make right here. And we don't need to hear anything. His actions are going to say, they're going to say everything. If Rob Pelinka does nothing, if the Lakers stand pat, like this article is mentioning, let's just say they stand pat. Let me play out that scenario real quick. Lakers do nothing. Okay. Let me tell you what standing pat means. Standing pat means I'm not wasting any more assets on this team. That's what standing pat means. Okay. Standing pat is the equivalent of a business that is, every single month they're looking at the profit and the loss, and they're asking themselves, they're saying, okay, do we keep dumping money into this business, or do we file for Chapter 11 and let this business go and kind of reorganize this entire thing and then come back with a different strategy? If Rob Pelinka does nothing between now and the trade deadline, in my opinion, what he's saying is, I'm not investing anymore in this team. It's not worth my assets to invest any more into this team. Okay, that's one option there. That's if they stand pat. Let's say that they take a half measure trade, which, by the way, listen, I'm not completely opposed to. If it's the right player, if it's the right skill set, if you're getting rid of players that you don't really feel like are the right assets, and you didn't give up every asset that you have, that would make me think, okay, Pelinka is still not giving up on this season, still thinks with the right tweaks, and this has got to go right, and that's got to go right, that the Lakers can potentially be a headache for other teams out there. And he's also not saying, well, I'm not going to also give up every single asset, because I do have to think about next year and 3 years and 5 years and when LeBron retires and what happens with Anthony Davis once LeBron decides that he's done. If he makes a half measure trade, then I look at Rob Pelinka as basically saying, okay, I'm going to make some tweaks. I'm also going to rely on the roster that we have. I'm going to rely on Vando to come back. I'm going to rely on Dorian Finney-Smith to be better. I'm going to rely on LeBron and Anthony Davis in a 7-game series where you get the proper amount of rest, where it's less travel, all this other stuff. I'm going to rely on all of them, and I'm going to take my chances for what it is. The last approach about the Lakers potentially going all in, what is the all-in move? There really isn't an all-in move. The only all-in move that I've ever seen, that I've ever thought could be realistic, is if you went out there and you got somebody that said, okay, here's our third star, but more important than our third star, here's our future with Anthony Davis. Just as important as here's our third star. I know we like kind of using that term, but just more important than the third star, you got a player that you said, LeBron, when you're done, we got Anthony Davis and we got De'Aaron Fox, right? Or whoever it is that the Lakers would try to go all in for. But is that player, are you going all in for a guy like Jimmy Butler? I don't know. I think that's obviously such a short-term strategy, and you're not building a future with Jimmy Butler and Anthony Davis. You're just not going to. Now, you might get a couple of years maybe with that team. I think that's the least likely thing to happen, is the Lakers going all in. If they stand pat, I firmly believe this. I think if they stand pat, Rob Pelinka has said, I don't want to waste any more assets on this team. It's just not worth it. If they make a half-measure trade, I understand it, and that's probably the most likely thing to happen. And an all-in trade, I think, would surprise all of us. So whether that's another big man, a ball handler, whatever it is, that's kind of how I look at the Lakers and where they are right now. Okay, man, I'm yapping here like crazy. I didn't even realize Dylan's waiting for me. Look, Dylan's right here. He's ready to go, and I'm sitting here yapping. What's going on, Dylan?
Hey, how are you, man? Good morning.
Good morning, buddy. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time. I'll just say here, real quick, for those who don't know, Dylan Hernandez writes for the LA Times. Phenomenal job. Has been doing it for a long time. As opinionated as it gets. So, thank you, buddy, for joining the show.
No, thank you for having me on.
Okay, here I am, running my mouth about the Lakers. What a shock. What a surprise here. Lakers had the Clippers a couple days ago. They got a chance to play, obviously at Intuit Dome. My first time there. Not bad. Not bad there, Dylan. That's a nice little facility they've built over there. I'll ask you this, and I'd love to get your thoughts. Just by the time tonight's game is done, Lakers are at the halfway point of the season. When I say Lakers basketball, we're 40 games in. Can you give me just some of the things that come to your mind?
Yeah, just kind of an organization that's stuck, honestly, right? I mean, I think, they didn't have a choice but to basically go kind of into the LeBron James business, right? I mean, if we're really gonna tell the truth here, I mean, it really just hasn't been the same since Jerry Buss passed, right? I think sports organizations, always just kind of start at the top. Obviously, Jerry Buss was this visionary, and it hasn't been the same since, right? And so I think they try to kind of milk the end of Kobe as much as they could, right, to remain an attraction. And if you kind of look back, and I think what's very kind of instructive, right, is kind of that time between Kobe's retirement and LeBron James' arrival, You know, and you kind of look back. I mean, they picked up a lot of good players in these drafts, right? They accumulated a lot of talent, but you know, the Lakers are an organization that define themselves by championships, and when you do that, you need hope, right? Hope is your currency, right? Hope is what you sell to the fans. And you know, again, as many talented players as they picked up, and you know, right? If this were New Orleans, you'd be fine with this, right? You're like thinking, okay, well, down the road we'll eventually contend. But what really marked those years, I feel, was just kind of the absence of hope, at least in the short term. You know, and that's again fatal for a team like the Lakers. You know, like USC football right now, right? People expect national championships from the Trojans. They're not getting that. People start to lose interest, and so you know, obviously LeBron James falls out of the sky. Basically, LeBron picked them, right? Let's be clear about that. Delivers one championship. Unfortunately for them, it's in the bubble. And now they kind of have to, you know, again, like, you know, this, my colleague Bill Plaschke's kind of been arguing, hey, you know what, find a way to get rid of LeBron. Let's kind of move on with our lives. But you kind of can't, right? Because if you get rid of LeBron, you're kind of going back again to that previous era there. And as long as LeBron's around, you know, every time they go on a 3-game winning streak or something, you're kind of looking at it like, like maybe, right? Because he's still LeBron James. You know, now I do think, you know, now we're kind of in this part of the year that happens every year, right? As the trade deadline approaches, LeBron makes it very clear we don't have enough to win here, and he's kind of passive aggressively putting pressure on the front office to kind of make a move.
Did that on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. You know, when he said, right, we basically have to play perfect basketball to win. And so, you know, now I do think we've seen enough from this organization now to know they're not going to just kind of push all in here to see if they could get LeBron one more, you know, and basically kind of sabotage their future, right? Because they don't want to kind of end up, you know, in a situation where there's no talent coming in after LeBron leaves. So, you know, I think they're kind of stuck here, right? And they've gotten kind of into this, like, again, this LeBron business where, you know, and I know people are upset about the whole Bronny thing. I was even, you know, when they got eliminated last year, you know, I wrote, you know, at the time, you know, if they have to draft Bronny to get LeBron back, you do that, because right now that's what they're selling, right? What keeps them nationally relevant is LeBron James. What gives the fans any semblance of hope, and I know you could argue it's fake hope, but is LeBron James. And, you know, so again, like now you're at the same time, you're building around a 40-year-old superstar. We've kind of seen, right, kind of the sustainability that they probably need a third guy. You know, I think that right now they've kind of pushed all their, you know, eggs into the Austin Reeves basket to see if he could be the third guy. You know, and I think, right, even kind of before this year, I think a lot of us were kind of talking, you know, can you win a championship with Austin Reeves being your third best player? I'm not so sure about that, right? And
I don't think so.
Yeah, and I honestly, I don't. Yeah, I'm very skeptical of this one. You know, we kind of see him. You know, he's had great games, and then you know those days that he's like minus 20 or something, they get blown out, right? And so, you know, you probably need something a little bit more consistent there. But again, they're not probably going to. You know, I kind of when I first logged in here, I kind of heard you say, you know, you'd be surprised at them making kind of that, you know, all-in move, and I would be too. You know, so that just kind of leaves them where they have been, right? You know, you get a favorable draw in the playoffs. You know, maybe they can make a run to the conference championship, right? You know, if the matchup is bad, maybe they get knocked out early. You know, and I think every series that they're going to be in, you know, they'll make it feel like they have a chance, right? Because LeBron and AD are there. And you know, realistically, though, I don't think you're going to get any more of that, you know, until LeBron does retire.
Dylan, I'm curious. I think what you said in the beginning, look, the reality is Dr. Jerry Buss, you've been around the game for a long time. You've been around sports for a long time. Many would make the argument he's the greatest owner in the history of sports. So that's what Jeannie and the rest of the Buss family is not matching up against, but that's the legacy their father left. Their father left, hey, I'm the greatest owner to ever do this. Here are the keys to the car. What do you think happens? LeBron decides to retire whenever he does. Maybe he's done at the end of this season. I don't think it'll be this year, but let's just say after next year. What do you think of the position that this franchise is in? Because I think what you said, and you've heard people say it, LeBron picked the Lakers. It wasn't this, you know, unbelievable pitch that anybody put together. LeBron picked the Lakers. He wanted to come out here and move to LA. What does this franchise look like when LeBron decides, hey, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. Just how do you feel about the direction of the franchise because of ownership and everything else?
Yeah. But so again, my guess is we're gonna kind of go through the Lakers are gonna go through what they did in the post Kobe years. They'll draft some interesting players, but it's just gonna kind of not really go anywhere. And really, I mean, I think they're just kind of in the business, frankly, right now, just hoping the next guy just falls out of the sky again, right? You're really hoping, that Victor Wembanyama has just, grew up in France, just idolizing the Lakers, and is even willing to, forfeit some money to make a move here. Obviously, with the different rule changes with the contracts and everything, that whole situation even kind of becomes harder. And a lot of teams are locking up guys, earlier and earlier.
Sure.
So it's not like you have like a ton of superstars just kind of floating around out there waiting to come here. But it kind of does put you in a situation where you're just kind of waiting for that guy to appear. Now, the one thing that we've seen in town that could kind of change something is like if at some point you make the right hire, right? Obviously, the Spanoses long time have been known as bad owners, for the Los Angeles Chargers. They go out, they hire Jim Harbaugh.
Still hurts, buddy.
Yeah.
Still hurts.
We've had
our conversation. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they go out and hire Jim Harbaugh, and
sure,
everything changes, right?
You're right. 100%. 100%.
I think, with the Rams, Sean McVay, that changed everything. With the Dodgers, as much as he and I have had our disagreements over the years, Andrew Friedman coming here has, changed that franchise. And so to me, it's really about maybe kind of finding that right decision maker, and they're kind of, again, it's, the Lakers, as big a brand as it is, right? And I think that this is part of the charm of the franchise. It is kind of run like a family business because it is, right? And it's smaller actually operationally than a lot of other teams are. And, I think that would surprise a lot of people. Part of the downside of that, though, is now, if you're not kind of in the family, it's kind of hard to break in there. Right. And, right. Magic Johnson was obviously very involved for some time. And now you have Rob Pelinka, who obviously has his ties to Kobe Bryant and their family and stuff. And so, because they're now very insulated, it does kind of make it harder, I think, maybe you're not quite as familiar with the outside world, so to speak, and who, again, with the Rams, that was a masterstroke, right? How they kind of identified this young Sean McVay, and they're like, that's our guy. And they kind of hit the home run there. I mean, that, right, just finding that guy, identifying that guy in itself, that takes like a certain amount of work and a willingness to kind of look outside from before. And I'm not so sure they're positioned to do that, but that is kind of the one thing, maybe, at some point the obvious choices kind of appears, right? Sometimes, again, with Harbaugh, that's what happened. I don't think the Spanoses just became smarter all of a sudden. Harbaugh was available and it just kind of fit. Hey, you got the quarterback here too. It fit on both sides and everything just kind of came together. But again, that kind of feels like the Chargers have been around for how long now? And this is probably the first time they kind of everything, right, for that team just kind of came together after years and years of being cursed. So, you're kind of relying on some luck, I think, for the Lakers to kind of turn this thing around, either, again, in that superstar appearing or that, that executive that's going to kind of change the culture here entirely.
I got one more Laker question for you, and then I do want to switch gears. You and I have had some really good conversations kind of behind the scenes that I want to take on here. So if you're we got some good Dodger conversations, baseball conversations that we're going to have here. It's interesting, seeing this team, and it's funny that you said that you kind of hand the keys over to somebody else. And Andrew Freeman's a good example for what the Dodgers have done. And I like some of the examples that you gave. Do you see, and this is the part that I think is kind of fascinating to me, because the Lakers have such an advantage because they are the Lakers. Before anything even starts, it's like there's the brand, there's the familiarity, there's the global brand that they are. And then all you got to really do from there is just say to yourselves, well, if I'm going to hand the keys, let me identify which person around the league has been for, 7, 8, 10, 12 years, has really kind of done an unbelievable job with less resources, less of a brand and everything else. Do you see that the Lakers ever taking that strategy, which it seems so obvious? Let's go get the best. Let's pay whatever it takes. And let's get the hell out of the way. Now, what you said about, the family ties and everything else, that's just kind of the way the Lakers are ran. And maybe that's part of their, no, we treat you like family. It's not just business. Do you ever see a move like that happening where they went and identified? I'm just using Sam Presti as an example because that is really truly one of the more unique stories around the league of what he's been able to do in that market. Do you see a strategy like that in the future?
Yeah, because I think at some point you do have to change, right? And I think again, let's go back to the Chargers here. I do think they whatever all the years of losing and right. I'm sure the Spanos family got sensitive to that criticism. I mean, I think at Harbaugh's press conference, you really saw Dean kind of talk about how he was overjoyed that people were happy with him for once. He talked about I'm actually getting nice letters from people.
Hmm.
And so I do think that after a while, like if you really feel cornered, you don't really have a choice but to do that, right? And they obviously have empowered Harbaugh to really kind of take this thing and shape it in the way he wants. The investment obviously that the Chargers made kind of in that practice facility, right? I do know that there was a lot of outside investment there, but the fact that they took the step to actually kind of build their own thing there, I think is kind of an indicative. It's kind of indicative that like, hey, like what we're doing now kind of doesn't work. We need to go ahead and change some things, and so. Yeah, I do think, because the one thing, the great thing about the Lakers franchise, the great thing about all kind of these signature franchises is the public is ultimately going to be the judge here, right? And, if it's the Clippers, right now, again, the Clippers are playing great basketball and nobody cares, right?
Hmm.
The Lakers, the one great thing about the Lakers, they can be horrible. People will care because that is the team that they grew up with. That is the team, it means something to a lot of people, and I do think because of that, there's always going to kind of be that public pressure. And we've seen, right, public pressure has done a lot of things. I mean, the public, was the one that got rid of Frank McCourt, right? I mean, the public kind of after all the, the stuff during the divorce came out and the bankruptcy, the fans kind of said, hey, this is enough, and it basically forced like Major League Baseball to come in and basically find a way to extract him from the situation. And so, yeah, I do think public pressure will, does a lot in terms of, kind of shaping the directions these franchises take.
All right, let's switch gears here. So you and I were talking, let's see, it was Lakers Spurs, maybe a little bit over a week ago. We're at the Lakers game at Crypto. It's actually first game since the fires.
Yeah.
And we're having a conversation, and you and I have a little bit of background together from a couple different ways. But obviously I'm a San Diego Padre fan, originally from San Diego, and we're talking about Roki. And you had mentioned to me, you're like, listen, basically you felt at that point, if he was going to make a decision, it's probably going to be with the Dodgers. Play it out. He ends up being a Los Angeles Dodger. And for whatever the reasons are, that's where he ends up. I think you're one of the people, even though you write for LA, but I love how objective you can be on so many of these different topics. A lot of people really are at the LA Times, but just in general, I guess my question to you is this. Let me start off from a baseball perspective, and then I'll hone in on the Dodgers and what they've been able to do. What I keep saying is you can't blame the Dodgers for what they're doing this offseason and what they've built. And by the way, if anybody thinks they just all of a sudden started spending money, a year ago or 2 years ago, no, the Dodgers they've been in the mix every year since the Guggenheim Group took over. I guess my question to you is more, what do you make of the disparity between some of these franchises in MLB baseball? How much of that do you blame on other franchises that are not spending enough? How much of that do you blame on, well, this team has endless amount of money? Just kind of the health of MLB baseball. We saw this offseason, aside from last year when they went out and, did the 700 for Shohei and the 325 for Yamamoto and Glasnow and everything else, they're still on a spending spree, and it doesn't seem like it's going to stop. Is good for baseball, bad for baseball? Just your thoughts on what's happening right now between the Dodgers and the rest of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, so owners are cheap. Like, let's be clear about that, right? Most owners are very cheap, and which actually, ironically, right, everybody's kind of complaining about this, created the very rules that allowed Sasaki to go to the Dodgers, and he's gonna be on minimum salary this coming year because of these rules, right? Because when Matsuzaka came, when Darvish came, They were basically at that point, the posting fee was kind of unlimited, and it just went to the highest bidder, and you're basically buying the player from that team, and they were getting into the 50 millions, the 60 millions, and the owner said, "Wait a second here, we don't feel
can't
comfortable
afford that,
with this." Right? So they put a $20 million cap, and now it's just a percentage of the contract, right? And so, that happened because the owners were cheap, right? I mean, if this were like a free market, right,
yep.
and you had to bid, I mean, probably somebody pays Chivalote like $100 million for him, and now after, and even with the Dodgers, as much as they've been spending, if they just spent 100 and whatever million on Blake Snell, are they going to turn around and spend another 100 to get Sasaki just to buy him, and right, another maybe 200-300 to sign him to an actual contract? You don't, right? And so, yeah, the Dodgers are really kind of, I feel, taking advantage of the climate, and with a lot of these kind of teams that tend to be ahead of the curve. We always say, right, when everybody's zigging, they zag. And the zigging right now is to not spend money, right? And then these teams have done a phenomenal job, by the way, of convincing their fans that it's against their interest to spend money, right? Because, these compensation picks that they might lose down the road, it's going to financially hamstring us down the road. And frankly, even with the Dodgers, right? I mean, as much as they, you did mention they were kind of in every year with these guys, it always, to me, kind of felt that they were there to, okay, if your market collapses, we'll be like a really good second option for you, right? So with Freddie Freeman, it's not like they jumped in and were like, okay, let's go over the top here.
No,
it was the Braves didn't give him what he wanted. He didn't want to go to Miami, and like, hey, we're right here, right? Mookie Betts, basically, the Red Sox were just desperate to get rid of him because they didn't want to sign him to an extension. Dodgers were right there to pick him up, And so now I do think that Ohtani's kind of changed the entire. They've just given the Dodgers this shot in the arm, in terms financially, right? Because all of this money's deferred. I've talked to some people that have estimated that the Dodgers will make more than $1 billion just because, right, 68 of the $70 million salary that he makes every year is deferred, right, until after he retires. And, they don't need that like cash necessarily, like an escrow or anything. They can take that money and invest it, right? In Guggenheim, which owns the Dodgers, that's an investment company. So, they put the thing in, and, I don't know what the returns are, 15, 20%, whatever, every year. Over time, that money's going to multiply. So they're going to make money off that money. And now they've really kind of taken this. They've seen, okay, nobody else is spending. We have all this extra cash sitting around because of Ohtani, right? And now you're kind of seeing this thing where, right, they can afford to pay these very high signing bonuses because Ohtani's not getting this money up front. And so, like, hey, we got cash sitting around. Let's just hand it out. And that convinces these players in turn to, like, because they're getting money up front. Okay, I'll defer this much of my contract. And this thing is just kind of snowballing. And yeah, there is this big gap now. I don't think it's a bad thing, for baseball, because we have to keep in mind where the sport is as a whole right now, which is not in a good place, right? I do think this past year kind of created this mirage that, like, okay, baseball's doing great because you got a signature player in Ohtani, on a signature franchise like the Dodgers. And you kind of got the Dream World Series, Dodgers, Yankees, and obviously the ratings are way up, compared to the year before between the Reds, the Rangers, and the Diamondbacks. I kind of go back to like the late '90s Yankees teams, right? The last kind of dynasty that we had in baseball. And the fact that, right, and with all due respect to guys like Bernie Williams and Paul O'Neill, who are very good players, but those guys actually became household names because you turn on the TV every October and you see them; they become familiar. And I think, when you kind of look at the fact that in a couple of years, baseball's national TV contracts with Fox and ESPN are going to expire, the collapse of the RSN market, which is really kind of the backbone of the sport, given how regional of a sport baseball is, right? Teams are very, and players are very popular in their market, but you don't have guys that are really nationally known. So from that standpoint, if the Dodgers are in the World Series every year, right, everybody's going to be, how many baseball players really have national endorsements right now? Maybe Ohtani, and that's it, right? And he's not even, and so, the fact that like Mookie Betts and, Mookie Betts is in Japan right now, pitching
it's
some
tea company.
Tea company, right?
By the way, Dylan, and I was reading that this morning, but that kind of that trickle effect of Ohtani that you're talking about. I do feel like I did a video right when Roki signed. It's like, listen, all of this is still Ohtani. Like all of this, the trickle effect. But when I was reading that article this morning, and and Mookie Betts is in Japan, he's promoting a tea company. I'm like, well, that clearly obviously happens with what just happened with the Dodgers and, obviously all these other Japanese players that are there. This man is putting a lot of money in a lot of people's pockets.
Yeah, and I think at some point Mookie was standing next to an Ohtani cutout, right? Which I think says kind of everything. Yeah, but like, and then you see it, like I think most like in combat sports, frankly, right? Where when you have a superstar, everybody that kind of comes in contact with the guy also becomes a star, right? You have this like halo effect, with Oscar De La Hoya, right? I mean,
sure.
Floyd Mayweather was not
100%.
a well-known fighter until he fought Oscar De La Hoya. Felix Trinidad, he made famous. Bernard Hopkins, he made famous. You could argue, I think, that he took Manny Pacquiao from being, a guy who was popular among boxing fans into like a mainstream attraction. And so I think Ohtani's kind of having a similar
little
effect.
Bit of that with Conor McGregor in the UFC.
Exactly.
There's like certain guys that you're right, just elevated the whole sport.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, again, having this team in October, and I just saw they just signed Kirby Yates. Like 10 minutes ago, I think I just saw something pop up.
Didn't know that.
I
did not know
so
that.
now they got like the two best relievers that were available.
Wow.
They just got Tanner Scott, so they're really doing. This is going to be fascinating. I mean, we talk about the pressure that's been on Dave Roberts up until now. But it was still kind of like in the thing of like, well, just because you have the best team in baseball, and I think people understand that, right? Just because you have the best team doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. The Dodgers are trying their hardest to make sure that they can guarantee a World Series. I mean, it's really hard for me to imagine how they lose at this point. I mean, they have 10 major league quality starting pitchers. They're building what could be the best bullpen in baseball. They have the best lineup in baseball. But again, it only takes like two pitchers on the other team to mess up your whole season. But yeah, but they are trying to kind of create this thing where it's like, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're there every October. And I think that's great for the sport because there aren't many players, presently that kind of have national recognition. And if the Dodgers are there every October, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, again, these are names that are very popular among baseball fans. You go ask the average NFL fan, they might not know who these guys are. Like, it's shocking just how little people know about baseball right now. And this team will give, I think, baseball a chance to kind of, again, right, have people that are like nationally identifiable, which, again, given all the stuff that's going on with their TV stuff right now, I think is going to be very crucial.
So how do you compete against it? Because I think that the question I would have is, I get the angle of why it could just raise the level of interest in baseball, or, we've kind of had this conversations. Villains is good for business. It is, when you have a team or a player that's a villain, all of a sudden it's like, well, I want to watch that. I get a certain emotion because I'm watching this team or this player or whatever the case is. And that's all you're looking for. You want emotions. That's part of the entertainment side. But I guess my question is, how do you build against this? How do you compete against this? And this is just a broad question from a baseball perspective.
Yeah, I think and we've seen over the years, I think there are multiple ways of doing it, right? I think the Padres, for example, right, they went out, they spent money, and they built a team that was basically designed to beat the Dodgers, right? I do think it hurts them over 162. But you get into a short series against these guys, right? They are built to beat the Dodgers, and they did a couple of years ago, and they probably should have done it this time too, right? I mean, I do think the Dodgers, they were probably the best team in the league by the end of the season. So there's kind of that tactic. You can kind of do, what Arizona did the year before, right, in 2023, which is kind of more the homegrown type thing, right? And kind of try to find the right pieces in free agency to kind of plug them in there. Pitching is what's going to win, right? And I do think now, and that is kind of the one area I think that can kind of still be exploited in a way, in that you don't have the Randy Johnson, Kurt Schilling, the Pedro. Pete Kershaw guys, Pedros, the guys that are just going to give you like 8 innings. That's not the game anymore, right? And I think, frankly, getting Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates here, to me, is a reflection of that, right? And the Dodgers kind of acknowledging, okay, we could have the best rotation, But, come playoffs, right, all of a sudden the 6, 7 innings that you get in the regular season, that becomes 5.
And the way
But
they use their bullpen in the postseason.
right, yeah. And, Dave Roberts did a fantastic job, I think, kind of pulling all the levers there. But, what's tough about relievers, obviously, year to year, there's more kind of variance in terms of like how they might perform, and so I do think the Dodgers are kind of reacting to that. They're trying to cover up that hole. But you know what? You get, again, in the playoffs, you get 2 starting pitchers going hot, especially like in a 5-game series. You can take them down, right? They're not going to be invincible. And I don't think we're going to see them just kind of, I could be wrong here, but I don't think we're going to see them just win like the next 5 World Series. Like somebody's going to get them at some point. Maybe they win 3 and 5, but even then it's going to be 2 years that they didn't win. And I think, maybe that's the kind of balance that you need, right? They don't win. And in LA, it's going to be just an absolute disaster. And you and I, right, you're going to be saying on the air, and I will be writing columns about how could they blow this, bunch of chokers, this and that. And then obviously whatever, market, the team that knocks them out resides in, they're going to be overjoyed by this thing. Hey, we just slayed Goliath. And I think that'll be great for baseball, right? I mean, again, I just say go back, to that Rangers Diamondbacks World Series. We didn't even talk about it, right? I can't imagine, I don't think I spent any column inches on that. I'm sure you mentioned it like in passing, but I really doubt you did an entire segment on that World Series. And so I do think that these things will, right, and because of the nature of baseball, this isn't, basketball or, football, where if you kind of construct a team the right way, you could become unbeatable. Pitching's going to get you. And I do think that at some point, bats go cold. We've seen it before, right? We saw it with, when, the previous 2 seasons before this year where, they had Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman in the lineup, and they both had historic years, right? Probably the best, like 1, 2.
Trey Turner in that mix too struggled.
Yeah, and we've seen those teams shut down, and it's going to happen again, right? I mean, the one thing about the Tanner Scott thing that I really like is you're also kind of taking away the big Ohtani killer, right? He could not hit Tanner Scott in the playoffs, and not only is Tanner Scott going to help them, he's going to also help them. They've also basically taken away kind of the biggest antidote to the Ohtani thing that any other team can have, which again I think is going to be huge in October.
Dylan, final one I got for you, and I appreciate you taking the time. You mentioned San Diego, you mentioned the Padres, and they obviously, had a chance, did not beat the Dodgers. And then all of a sudden you've seen this offseason, they really haven't done anything. And the biggest story has been about the Seidler family, Peter Seidler's wife versus Peter Seidler's brothers. I know you were a part of some ownership change. And like you mentioned, there was a lot of pressure from the city to get rid of Frank McCourt. And they eventually did it. And this is what happened. When you look at that situation in San Diego, and you'll probably just have more knowledge than I would. Does something like this, could it get really ugly? Can it last for years? Tell me the effects, short-term, long-term, something like this can have.
Yeah, I think, the worst thing, right, is if this thing kind of goes through the courts and stuff, and at some point they say, okay, well, until we settle this, don't spend. Already as it is, because of the RSN situation, the Major League Baseball, right, had to cover part of their payroll. And I'm, again, I don't think, I don't know. There's no evidence that there was any kind of like direct, directive, like, hey, you have to trade Juan Soto. But I think that that's what led to that, obviously. And, now that trade actually kind of worked out, right? Because they got Michael King in return. It actually kind of worked out in their favor. But yeah, that could be kind of the worst thing, right? That there's some kind of freeze on the spending there. And I do think, and I look at this, Padres team right now. Profar's still not signed, is he?
He's not signed. Profar's not signed.
Yeah, and so, because I think of that Padres team, and part of like what makes them, right? I think of the Dodgers as kind of being, hey, we come out, right? We take care of business every day, kind of this calm, collected, they're the same every day, regular season, every single day.
Corporate.
Same.
A little more corporate. Yeah.
To me, the Padres, my favorite thing in the playoff series was when, the ball Mookie hit into the corner. Profar pretended it had got into the stands, and it turned out he had caught it. I think if you're the Padres, you want to kind of have that type of energy. And I think the biggest, and I said this even before, right? Short of Sasaki, who was obviously just this like lottery ticket. for the Padres, I thought the biggest move was for them to kind of bring back Profar to kind of maintain that spirit. And, so like that, something like that doesn't happen. Right. And that could be like a side effect of something like this. And then it kind of starts materially changing the team. You start cutting corners here and there in terms of, well, we have an option between these three relievers. Okay, maybe the top guy, maybe we can't afford him. Take the cheaper one. And all of a sudden, right, it's a one-run game in October. Stuff like that could be the difference. So that to me would be kind of the unfortunate thing, because it's such a great thing that they have going, though, isn't it? I mean, it was to the point where I don't think Sasaki going to the Dodgers is a bad thing. I do think the best thing for baseball would have been Sasaki going to the Padres.
Sure.
Right. Just to see that matchup with Ohtani, and not just because they're both from Japan, not just because they're from the same area of Japan, right? They're from the same prefecture, but just because they're two great players. It'd be like if the Padres had Paul Skeens and you got to see him go against like Ohtani, in September down a pennant race, 3-game race. I would have loved to have seen that. I think that would have been great. And, rivalries, that's kind of the thing, right? Is that so many times you just see, I do feel kind of right now, and right, I'm guilty of this. You probably are too, where, we kind of try to manufacture storylines to kind of make the thing interesting. There's nothing manufactured about this, right? The whole thing, it speaks to something so much bigger. San Diego, LA, culturally, I don't think we're that different, right? We're only 2 hours apart, but it does kind of draw out something. And again, I think from a Dodger fan standpoint, the Padres are such great like heels, right? I mean, the fact that, like Manny Machado, I love the fact that Manny Machado gets booed at Dodger Stadium every time, right? It's such like an LA thing too. I feel, that there's certain guys that we just kind of don't like for some reason, and Machado plays that part perfectly.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I've said this before on the show that I do think that I think the Roki thing was interesting. I think the Roki thing could have created this, hey, I want to go up against the best, hypothetically, right? And I think if you look at the playoffs, I think as exciting of a series was the Padres versus the Dodgers. And I think that was good for baseball. And there was kind of, so many times there is this Red Sox Yankees. It's kind of like the only one that you could think of because location, the history, all that stuff. There is potential between San Diego and LA to kind of have that. By the way, San Diego feels that way about LA, but LA doesn't necessarily feel that way about San Diego. But the only way you can get LA to feel that way is if you're in their way. If you do beat them, if you do kind of create something of like, hey, that city and that squad is a problem, but you got two directions, or you got two franchises. It feels like one is going in this direction, and the Padres are, unfortunately, there's too many question marks right now with where the Padres go. Dylan, great stuff, buddy. I appreciate you doing this. Appreciate you coming on. It's a good perspective to have. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. That is Dylan Hernandez, LA Times. All right. Good stuff from him. Yeah. I've mentioned this to you guys before. Him and I have had some conversations kind of behind the scenes. He's one that, we were having a chat a little bit over a week ago or so when we were talking about Roki. He's like, I think he's going to eventually end up with the Dodgers. But we were talking a little bit more just kind of the overall look of baseball, where baseball is going. So I wanted to get his perspective on things. All right, let me look at some comments here. Let's take a look at some of the comments here. Let's see what I've ignored my people. By the way, I love that even through that whole conversation, the whole chat is still about LeBron and the Lakers. Let me see what we got here. Yeah, basically everything's still on that. Okay, let's do a couple things here. Let's see what we got here. Slee, you compete against it by taking on the little engine that could mentality, David versus Goliath. You know what's funny? I will tell you this. It's not even really about one team anymore. It's almost like everyone's going up against the Dodgers. I mentioned this yesterday. The biggest compliment you can have if you're a fan of a certain team is when everybody hates you. It's the biggest compliment. The biggest compliment you can have is, I'll use this as an example. Dylan was just talking about Manny Machado. When Machado comes to bat at Dodger Stadium, I know Dodger fans hate him for multiple reasons, but when he comes to bat there and they boo him, it's a compliment. right? I mean, when LeBron gets booed, it's a compliment. And when the Dodgers this year, wherever they go and whatever they do, they're going to be the villain. They're going to have a bullseye on their back, and it's kind of not going to matter, right? It's a compliment that everybody's rooting against them. Um, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I don't want to get into. I'll shoot through a couple of this stuff here real quick. I want to say this, and I'm going to give everybody just a kind of a quick heads up on this one. So yesterday I did a video on the Dodgers, right? And it was talking about what they've done, how it's kind of laughable. How do you compete against them? One thing I've asked, and I have no idea if this is going to happen or it's not. One thing I've asked is when I have topics, when I have things that I want to get into, my hope is that I can interact with the audience and we could just have solid conversations. You have a view on something, you disagree with me, cool. Tell me why. I don't mind that you disagree, but let's have that back and forth. I want to compliment one of the videos that I did yesterday because I went on and I talked about the Dodgers, and it's very typical. I could see Dodger fans just coming on here and just saying, "Al, you know what? You're a hater. You're a hater. You're from San Diego. That's why you hate on the Dodgers." When really all I'm trying to do is just let me give you another perspective, and then I'm also going to give credit where credit's due. I was reading some of the comments this morning of the video I did on the Dodgers, basically saying, like, this is laughable. How do you compete with it? All that stuff. I got to be honest. For the first time, I think that I've been doing Lakers, it's no problem. Lakers, I'll get everything. Lakers, I'll get people that I think because, people know me enough around the Lakers, as in our conversations about the Lakers. I'll get people that are positive about the Lakers, negative about the Lakers, the whole thing. I'll get the entire thing. I'm reading the comments yesterday from Dodger fans. It was, I don't know how to say this, but really healthy dialogue in the chats. That doesn't happen all that often on some of these platforms. So I hope this channel is heading in the direction where we can just have conversations about whatever it is and have a good kind of back and forth conversation. So, whatever the comments were, some is saying, I don't blame I blame the other owners. I don't blame the Dodgers. Other people were saying, hey, you know what? I'm a Dodger fan, but what's happening is a little bit insane. How are they able to do all this over other teams? So I thought it was kind of a fun back and forth. Okay. I'm done on the baseball front. I did obviously most of the Lakers stuff today. The only thing that I put in here about Cooper Kupp, he may be leaving the Rams. He had a quote saying that he's not 100% sure what's going to happen. I don't have any clarity. Obviously, the Rams lost to the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Rams. There's no guarantee or lock that Matthew Stafford's coming back, even though I do think he'll be back. Cooper Kupp, we know when the Rams were, when they start the season out, 1-3, 1-4, whatever their record was, I think 1-4. There was a lot of chatter about potentially trading Cooper Kupp. So it's going to be interesting what happens. That dude's an absolute stud. Obviously did a lot for the Rams. So we'll see whatever happens in regards to that. The college football stuff, I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll get your guys' thoughts and opinions on some of the college football stuff out there and what we thought of college football. All right, let's see what we got. Let's see. All right, people just, I think, fighting against each other. Yeah, everybody's just kind of going at it. You guys do your thing. The whining from other fan bases after Dodgers will repeat will be epic. Probably right about that. That squad is, I don't know what to tell you. There's literally no hole, and they have 39 starting pitchers and 39 reliable bullpen guys. All right, my people, what do we go? $1.08 today, almost $1.09. Couple reminders here. I'm going to be on tonight after the Lakers take on the Washington Wizards. For those who don't know, Lakers play the Wizards at 7:30 tonight. So the postgame, we should be ready by about 2:30 in the morning. I'll come on, talk a little Lakers basketball following the game. Back on tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. as well. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you guys being a part of the show. Please subscribe to the channel. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.